Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for your patience. We're so glad that you're here. We're going to get started in just a minute, but while we're waiting for some more folks to join, I invite you to drop in the chat your name and where you're joining us from tonight, just so we can see where folks are coming from. But we're so glad you're here, and we'll get started again in just a minute.
Olympia.
Nice. Probably snowier than it is here. Awesome. Another person on the West Coast. Welcome.
Great.
Thanks for joining us. I have to say, this is my favorite part of now Zoom programs, is to see where folks are located. Usually have folks joining us from all over the country, so really wonderful. Welcome.
This is really incredible.
Yeah, it's a great group. Welcome, welcome. All right, so I think we're going to get started. Hopefully there are going to be more folks who join us in a couple of minutes, but we want to make sure to give all of our wonderful presenters time to share. So welcome again. My name is Larissa Wall. I'm the Assistant Director of Community Engagement at B'nai Jeshurun on the Upper West Side of Manhattan in New York City. And I am so glad that you have all joined us. I hope it looks like we have some folks who are probably newer to the conversation around refugee and immigration issues, specifically at BJ and our involvement, and some folks who I know have been involved in this work for many, many years. So, again, we're really glad that you're here and that we have the opportunity to share a little bit about what's going on with our work here, and then also to give our friends at HIAS the opportunity also to share in relationship to the work that we're doing, but also what they're trying to do kind of more nationally. So tonight we'll get to hear first from Russ Agner, who's part of HIAS, and then we will have a chance to hear from two of our amazing teams that are doing work on the ground. And we'll also get a chance to hear a little bit more about the Synagogue Coalition and the refugee immigration crisis. So really fun from the top down, from the national perspective, more to the local and what we're doing here on the ground in New York City. And if you have any questions, feel free to directly chat them to me. There will be a Q&A period at the end, so definitely you can hold them until the end. I think it's a small enough group that we'll hopefully be able to, let folks unmute themselves to ask the questions. But if you do have questions that I might be able to answer throughout, or that I can funnel to the folks presenting, I'm happy to do that. So send any questions my way. So we're going to get started with Russ Agner, who I'm very pleased is joining us. He is the National Grassroots Campaign Director. I think I got that title right, and is joining us currently from Brooklyn. So Russ, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Larissa. And it's really wonderful to get to be meeting with you today. I'm excited to be connecting with B'nai Jeshurun's community and the larger across the country B'nai Jeshurun community. It's a community that I have some really treasured feelings for. It's a community that's been a part of my own Jewish journey. I've spent some Friday nights, Saturday mornings, and Simchas Torah celebrations there over the years. And this is a relationship that goes back a ways, a little over 82 years ago on Christmas Day in 1938. My grandparents actually got married at 88th Street at the B'nai Jeshurun Sanctuary. So it's really a pleasure to be here, especially with such a powerhouse social justice congregation. Really incredible work. So I'm I'm HIAS's National Grassroots Campaign Manager, as Larissa mentioned. I want to take a few moments to give you sort of a quick background on HIAS, the big picture on where things are and have been with refugee and asylum seekers over the last couple of years, and then talk a little bit about our priorities for the upcoming year, and some actions you could take with us, with B'nai Jeshurun, with the Synagogue Coalition, for those of you who are in New York, and Sandy's going to give you some good information on that later. So first off, about HIAS, just quick show of hands. Who here has heard of HIAS before? Great. For folks that haven't, HIAS is the Jewish humanitarian agency that works with forcibly displaced people around the world. We were founded 140 years ago in 1881 as the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society on Manhattan's Lower East Side. In our first days, we met new Jewish arrivals to New York City right on Ellis Island, not so far from where BJ's Sanctuary is today. We provided kosher food to weary new immigrants, some of whom had often been on a boat without food for their long journey. We assisted with translation as they worked to fill out immigration paperwork and provided temporary shelter. In fact, for those of you that are in New York City or travel to New York City, at some time, several months from now, if you have a chance to go to the Public Theater in downtown Manhattan, before you enter the building, you'll notice a plaque just to the left of the door that indicates that that building was once a HIAS shelter. A friend who used to work for the Public Theater said when they originally renovated the space, they went to the large downstairs theater and they found it full of Siddurim, full of prayer books, because it had been used as the HIAS synagogue space. At the time, we also provided all of our male clients with the famous HIAS $12 suit so that they could dress the part as they interviewed for jobs. Now, HIAS would continue to grow in the United States and across the world, joining forces with related organizations to build an operation that would help Jews emigrate here to the United States or elsewhere, coordinating visas and documents, providing complex resettlement services to those who needed it. Throughout our history, we rescued Jewish refugees, whether they were fleeing pogroms in Tsarist Russia, the horrors of the Holocaust, persecution in Iran, the former Soviet Union, Cuba, or Egypt. We provided the same services that we did in our earliest days: food, housing, job assistance, medical care, and translation assistance. In our roughly first 120 years, HIAS resettled about 4.5 million Jews to the United States and helped countless more to arrive safely in other countries. In the last several years, our mission has expanded. Today, in response to the urgency of the global refugee crisis, and based in our Jewish values and history, HIAS works with refugees from all over the world, regardless of their race, religion, or ethnicity. As our CEO, Mark Hetfield, often says, we used to do this work because they were Jewish, and now we do this work because we are Jewish. I'm going to share my screen a little bit because I've got a few, I know it's a lot to hear from somebody for a few minutes. So I'm going to jump on and share screen. So today, we are in 17 countries around the globe working to provide resettlement, other services and support, helping folks whether they're headed here or to another country. And we're on the ground in those countries. And we're also the Jewish advocacy voice here in the United States around refugee and asylum seeker policy. Now, let me talk a little bit about, here, I'm having trouble advancing the slide. There we go. Sorry about that. So let's talk a little bit about the work we do. We work primarily with refugees and asylum seekers. Let me give you some definitions so you have a sense of what we're talking about. A refugee is a person who's been forced to flee their home country due to persecution because of their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group, like being a member of the LGBTQ community. This could include harassment, threats, abduction, or torture. A refugee is often afforded legal protection by the host country, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, or both. Here in the United States, they're hand-selected. Refugees that can come here are hand-selected and screened by multiple agencies before they are allowed to come here to the United States. Asylum seeker is a person who has fled persecution in their home country and is seeking a safe haven, but has not yet received legal recognition or status. Now here, and in some other countries, asylum seekers are sometimes detained while they're waiting for their case to be heard. So let's talk a little bit about the current situation around the world. We are facing the worst refugee crisis in recorded history. Nearly 80 million people have been forcibly displaced. 26 million of those are refugees. 4.2 million are asylum seekers. And 40% of the world's refugees are under the age of 18. Remember the first time I learned that fact. 67% are from 5 countries: Syria, Afghanistan, South Sudan, Myanmar, and Somalia. 85% of them are being hosted in developing countries. 80 million is about 1% of humanity now displaced. And UNHCR reports that 1.4 million are in need of immediate resettlement. Here in the United States, for folks who are not familiar with the picture, and I've got a lot of info here, but I'm gonna maybe speed it up a little bit because I want to make sure we get to the part where we're talking about taking action. But it's not an exaggeration to say that the previous administration did really significantly shrank the refugee resettlement program here in the United States over the last 4 years. The ceiling that they set for this fiscal year, for 2021, on refugees admitted to the United States, or the presidential determination, was 15,000. That's the lowest it's been in 40 years. The second lowest was the previous year, where the number was set at 18,000. The year before that was set at 30,000. The year before that, FY18, was set at 45,000, and we only got about half of that number admitted into the country. To give some perspective on this, the last PD presidential determination set by President Obama was set at 110,000 people. But it was lowered by President Trump to 50,000 via executive order as he came into power. I'm going to give you a little bit of detail on the landscape for asylum seekers, equally problematic as the situation for refugees. I want to start by saying seeking asylum is legal here and under international law. Individuals can seek asylum at a port of entry, between a port of entry at the border, or once already in the United States. And any effort to deter or block individuals from seeking asylum is actually illegal, according to international and United States law. Now, why this is important is because the last 4 years, there have been real significant roadblocks put in place for anybody trying to seek asylum. We had Border Patrol agents turning asylum seekers away at the port of entry. We had agreements with other countries to require asylum seekers to seek asylum elsewhere if they passed through other countries on their way to trying to seek asylum here. You've probably heard about Remain in Mexico, or MPP, forcing asylum seekers to wait in Mexico for their immigration court hearings. There were significant bans that again, the goal of all of these things was really to make it extremely difficult to impossible for someone to apply for asylum here in the United States. Well, we're in a new place now, which gives us an opportunity to think a little more proactively about the work that we can do together. We have an administration that knows refugees. I know Pesach is, still a ways away, but I thought we might appreciate that allusion. The President Biden, Vice President Harris administration are already working to make some real significant changes to policy around refugees and asylum seekers. President Biden already announced a goal of a presidential determination of 125,000 refugees for FY22, so next year's determination. And he's exploring significant increase of the FY 2021 determination. It hasn't quite been finalized yet, but we're hearing some good things and we're hopeful. The State Department and DHS have been asked by President Biden to review a lot of the adverse refugee and asylum policies put forth by the previous administration. Now, it's really good that we've got an administration that has a very different tune about refugees and asylum seekers in place. But to me, just as an organizer, that feels like this is, I know after the last 4 years, some of us might be breathing a sigh of relief and saying, oh, thank God we've got people in place that might actually do some good. And it's true. But that's not actually a reason to stop advocating or slow our advocacy work down. It's actually an opportunity for us to make real progress and make some real positive changes. And to me, that says that that's a reason for us to fight harder now in this moment. So we know that the administration has only the administration has only been in not quite a month yet, or actually no, a month and a day today. No, it's the 15th, not quite a month. Sorry. So we know that things are changing and that they are working on a lot of things, and not just on this issue, but on other issues as well. So these are some of our initial asks for the new administration and the new Congress, including the new majority leader who represents those of us that do live here in New York State in the Senate. So we're asking the administration to increase the FY21 refugee admissions cap. Right now, it's still at 15,000. And, being upfront, because of the work that the previous administration did to shrink the program, we know that it's going to take time to rebuild it, to hire the necessary staff to get things back online. But we still want to see an increase in the refugee admissions cap for this year. We want to see the bans that gutted refugee protections across the United States rescinded, including passing the No Ban Act, which includes safeguards from such bans happening in the future. Some of these things are really important to get done legislatively, understanding that a lot of the power on these issues rests with the president. There's still also a lot that Congress can do, and we want to see them do that. One of those things is we want to see them request adequate funding to actually rebuild the overseas and domestic components of the resettlement program, to increase to 125,000 next year. Is going to take significant resources put into place to make sure that that happens. And on the asylum seeker side of things, we want to see an end to all of the harmful policies that deny asylum seekers due process and the chance to seek asylum. We have a lot of asylum seekers in detention. We want to see them released from detention and ending all forms of detention when it comes to people seeking asylum. We want to see legislation passed that modernizes and improves our country's refugee system and asylum system, particularly the Refugee Protection Act once its new version is reintroduced. And lastly, and one of the most important things, is we want to see family separation ended in all forms. Now, how are we going to work to do those things together? Well, there are lots of ways to take action, and there are a few. I'm going to just outline a couple possibilities here. We are in the midst right now of our Welcome to Congress campaign. As some of you may know, for folks who follow HIAS, welcome is a big piece of who we are and what we talk about, it's a critical part of our message and who we are. And so we thought that it would be fitting, now that there is a new administration and a new Congress, the 117th Congress in town, we thought it would be really important to welcome them and to remind them that this country should be standing for welcome. So to that end, we have our Welcome to Congress campaign, and we are sending welcome cards, and there are communities across the country that are sending welcome cards to members of Congress. To let them know that they have constituents that want to see them prioritize welcoming refugees and asylum seekers and really standing up and taking action. So the welcome card is it looks a lot like an online petition. Folks are signing them and putting the congregation that they're a part of into their signature. And once you fill that out and complete that, as we get towards Refugee Shabbat, which is coming on the weekend of March 6th, we'll be working with communities once their cards are completed to help make them look nice and send them to the members of Congress that represent them. So that's one piece of that. Once that piece is done, one of the things that we are going to be doing with those welcome cards is there are going to be people around the country that's going to be the end step of their campaign. But for a lot of communities, after that step is going to come with asking members of Congress to meet with them, to talk to them about some of the issues that we've just laid out. So for those of you that are based in New York, the Synagogue Coalition on the Immigration and Refugee Crisis is an incredible local coalition that works with HIAS and other organizations on advocating and organizing around policy issues. So we'll be working with SCRIC to have them be a part of our lobby period as we're lobbying our members of Congress on these issues. So if you're in New York City, you should listen up real well to Sandy, who's going to be talking a little bit more about SCRIC in a few moments. If you're not in New York City, I'm the national campaign director, so I work with leaders all across the country. So if you're not in the New York City metropolitan area, I'm happy to work with you and Larissa to figure out what's the place that makes sense for you to plug into in terms of advocacy. And that's sort of our big policy push or our big advocacy push that's happening right now. I just threw a whole lot at you, and I think I'm at time, so I'm gonna pause here. And I'm excited to hear some questions when we're all wrapped up.
Thanks so much, Russ. And that was very impressive. You were right on time. So really appreciate that. I haven't seen any questions that have come through, but if, again, as folks are hearing everything that folks are sharing, if you have any questions, feel free to either put them in the chat or send them to me directly, and we can ask them of our presenters at the end. And for those who might have seen already, I put the link to the welcome card campaign in the chat, and you'll see there's a drop-down list to select your community. And for folks who are part of the B'nai Jeshurun community, feel free to fill that out. We'll also be able to see if they're out-of-town members who are filling it out. So we can also do some outreach with you. But again, that offer really stands if you aren't in New York City and you'd like to think through how to maybe do some advocating and some lobbying, feel free to reach out to me and we'll connect with Russ to figure out how to move forward.
Absolutely.
And now I am very happy to introduce Sandy Cheitan, who is a longtime member of B'nai Jeshurun, who has been involved in our social action and social justice work for many, many years, who is a former co-chair of the Synagogue Coalition on the Refugee and Immigration Crisis. And I'm going to hand it over her to share more.
Great. Thank you very much, Larissa. And welcome, everyone. Our work at BJ actually began way back in 2015 when we witnessed the Syrian refugees flooding into Greece, and the boats and the amazingly moving photograph of that young child face down. And we responded by saying, this can't happen. What can we do? And at BJ, we formed a committee to deal with refugees. This is 2016. And one of our first events was, we had Mark Hetfield, the president of HIAS, Congressman Jerry Nadler, who happens to represent BJ and be a member of BJ, and a number of other groups and people who were present, who presented. And as a result of that, we heard that a couple other synagogues on the Upper West Side were holding similar meetings. And we said, well, this is silly. Why don't we all get together and have a meeting, a joint meeting? This way, Mark Hetfield, Jerry Nadler, whoever we're inviting only has to speak once, and we would have a larger audience. And that led to the creation of the Synagogue Committee on the Refugee Crisis. Once again, we're now in 2016. We knew Hillary was going to win, and we'd have a wonderful road ahead of us doing positive work. Well, obviously that didn't happen. We got a different president. The situation changed. The plight of immigrants became despicable, what happened to them. And so the Synagogue Coalition expanded its mission to include refugees and immigration. Thus the name Synagogue Coalition on the refugee and immigration crisis. So since the end of 2016, we began with 5 synagogues. We now have about 30 in New York City. We have synagogues represented from Riverdale, Queens, Brooklyn, and we've partnered with nonprofits. We're a partner with the Jewish Community Center, Highest, Multi-Faith Alliance on Syrian Refugees, the Interfaith Center, New York Hebrew Theological Seminary, Jewish Theological Seminary, New Sanctuary Coalition, and are amongst others. So what do? We meet monthly, representatives, 1 or 2 from each of these groups and synagogues. We share information about what our individual synagogue or organization is doing. We look to partner with each other. At times, we support joint events. We've had debates, we've had forums, we invite speakers, we attend rallies and demonstrations as a coalition. We support our partners, and we also lobby, and Russ mentioned that. As the coalition, when we go visit a member of Congress or one of our centers, the joint membership of our synagogues that are part of the coalition now, we therefore represent about 25 to 30,000 people. And that makes the legislators pay attention to what we're saying. We get meetings, and our points are really very well taken. So, and I believe that our model of the Synagogue Coalition here in New York City has become a model for coalitions that have since formed, and Russ is in charge of that through Highest in other places. So that's pretty much the work of the Synagogue Coalition. We welcome synagogues and nonprofits in the New York area that deal with refugees or immigration. We provide direct services if we need, and we hope to continue our growth. And we now have a new focus, the Biden-Harris administration, and we look forward to working with them and our partners.
Thank you so much, Sandy, for sharing that. And just to note for folks to know, when the next 2 groups are done speaking, I'm going to put in the chat a link to a form for everyone who's attending to fill out if they're interested in getting involved either in the Synagogue Coalition of the Refugee Immigration Crisis, to join any of our mailing lists, to volunteer through the next 2 opportunities, which are going to be shared, and or to get involved with Highest. So there'll be an opportunity for you to let us know which additional steps you want to take. So thank you again, Sandy, for sharing that. So we're going to move on to focus a little bit on the work on the ground that's happening right now at BJ. Throughout the pandemic, a few things have shifted. We had a partnership with the Riverside Language Program, which was operating out of both the basement and multiple floors of our community house, providing English classes to folks who were recently in the country. And we had partners working to do resume building, writing workshops, and some mentor programs. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, that has been put on hold. But we do have 2 incredible teams who are still working and have engaged a lot of volunteers in the community to really provide support to recent refugees and asylum seekers in the US. So I am very proud to introduce Shoshana Akabis and Leah Silver, who are both longtime BJ members. Shoshana is a professor and a journalist around refugee and immigration issues, and Leah Silver is a teacher of wears many different hats, and one of them is a teacher in many different capacities. So I'm going to pass it on to them to talk about the family support team and all that entails. And just give me just a second, because I want to spotlight them both. So Shoshana, you can start and I will bring Leah in.
Great, thank you so much. So as Larissa mentioned, I am involved in refugee issues in a number of ways. I'm a writer, and I've also started a separate nonprofit called New Neighbors Partnership that actually works with HIAS to help connect refugees with resources. And in a volunteer capacity, I run the family support team at B'nai Jeshurun. Like Russ, my grandparents were also married at BJ, so I am a lifelong member. We go way back. And yeah, as Larissa also mentioned, some things have shifted during the pandemic. The family support team is really responsible for providing any kind of direct services that newly arrived refugee families and asylum-seeking families need. As some of you may know, many refugee families only receive around 3 months of assistance from their resettlement agency, and asylum seekers often receive no support like that whatsoever. So there really is a need for that kind of continued support and ongoing support to help families navigate everything about their new lives here. So to that end, we provide volunteers who help with tutoring, help with filling out forms, registering kids for after school programs, really anything that families need. We tend to work with about 8 to 10 families at a time, and we work with them for about 8 to 10 months. But of course, every family is different and requires different support from us. And we've also had some families, especially during the pandemic, who were quite stable and doing well, return to us for additional help in these past few months, especially with filling out unemployment forms, or we had a lot of volunteers, especially toward the beginning, helping folks fill out forms for benefits that they were entitled to, and really also helping educate them about what they were able to apply for in terms of SNAP and WIC benefits and all that kind of thing. So we really provide a lot of essential services. And one of our wonderful volunteers who works with a family from Afghanistan is here to tell us a little bit about what that work is like on the ground. We have about 60 volunteers, give or take, who provide some sort of regular service and work directly one-on-one with a family in an ongoing capacity. And then we have many, many more who provide sort of as needed services, whether it is picking up a refugee mother after she's given birth at the hospital and driving her home, dropping off groceries, all kinds of sort of one-time or shorter term opportunities. So we really welcome all skill sets, whatever you have to offer. I'm sure we could use help with. So I want to turn it over to Leah, who will share a little bit about her experience.
Thank you, Shoshana. And yeah, I'm also a lifelong BJ member. My grandparents did not get married at BJ, but my great-grandparents, my great-grandparents did benefit from HIAS. And so it's really nice to be part of this as a granddaughter and great-granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. I feel a special connection to this kind of work that my family benefited from not that many years ago, right? And so, yeah, when the pandemic started, I responded to an email from Larissa, I think, for, can you offer anything to our refugee families right now? And I thought, okay, the skill I can offer is to teach. So I'll respond with that. And I think it was over the summer that I began working with an incredible family with 2 students. And I have to say, from the beginning, I felt like just part of a team helping this family. I mean, Shoshana, I don't know, do you like double or triple yourself? I don't know how you have the bandwidth to do everything you do, but Shoshana is on every text thread and email with this family and really making sure that we're working hand in hand. She knows what the family needs way more than I do because she has a history with this family, and it's really helped me help them in the best way. And I have been able to give a skill that I have, and that's felt good, and I felt useful, and to this particular family who at this time, their kids over the summer were not in school. Now they're like kind of remote, sometimes in person, a hodgepodge of things. And we just have fun doing different math games and writing activities. I have a few, sometimes I take a screenshot of ours. A really nice moment to be able to put faces to names to people, to spend a very short amount of time together, but to continue helping them in this way, and to feel like, they're getting support in all different ways. And it's been a real pleasure to be a part of that. And I just want to thank Shoshana for the way that you coordinate this work. I mean, the one thing this family says to me all the time is like, thank God for Shoshana, for the way that you organize and help our families in such an intimate way. I think it's really rare, and they're really grateful, and I'm grateful to be part of that team. So thank you.
It's extremely kind of you to say. It's really a result of having volunteers like Leah who can do the one-on-one and on-the-ground work with these families. And I also want to say that the specific family that Leah was working with, the father served as a translator for US troops in Afghanistan and then had to flee once the Taliban discovered his work. And that is the story of many of the families we work with. About a third of our families come from Afghanistan under the special immigrant visa. But we do serve families from all over the place, from Central America and Asia and Africa. So yeah, it's really wonderful to get to meet all of these incredible families. And if you are interested in this kind of work, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Shoshana and Leah. And again, I'll throw a link in the chat towards the end where you can fill out your interest. It is not 100% commitment. If you just want to learn more about what it would take to volunteer, you have a special skill you think would be useful to the family support team, feel free to fill that out, and then we will connect you to the appropriate folks who have spoken tonight to move everything forward. So next we are going to hear from the BJ members who are involved in the Refugee Employment Partnership, also known as REP, which is a joint program of Riverside Church and B'nai Jeshurun. And we are, it's really wonderful. David Coldman, who is actually a BJ member, is a full-time staff member with REP. Richard Fields is the BJ member who is the volunteer coordinator of all of that. And we're lucky to have Shaquille Samuel with us, who is a recipient of some of those support, the support that REP offers. So I am going to turn it over to the three of them to share more.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Richard Fields. My parents were also not married at BJ, but I can say that my great-great-grandfather had his funeral in the BJ sanctuary. So I think I go back even farther. I learned that recently. We formed REP a little bit over 3 years ago. I'm pleased to say that Sandy was one of our great mentors and was instrumental in us forming and figuring out how to try to do this. So glad she's here with us. Unlike Shoshana's group, which obviously provides a very broad range of services, we focus on one thing and one thing only, which is helping recently arrived refugees and asylees find jobs, obviously a key thing. And in doing so, we partner with HIAS, with Church World Services, with Catholic Charities, and with other NGOs and nonprofits who serve the community and bring us their people. We, as was mentioned, actually it's not Riverside Church, we partner with Rutgers Presbyterian, who has been an early key partner to what we do, provides a number of volunteers and support for what we do. We're really privileged to work with them. We've also, over time, added other members of the community, so it's a nicely growing group of volunteers. We are all volunteer, except for, as Larissa said, David Coleman, who will speak next, who is our full-time, was an early volunteer, an early mentor, and is now our full-time program administrator and keeps everything working incredibly smoothly. We really do two things, two sides to what we do. One is we provide one-on-one mentors for each client we take on, and they help the client through all the stages of an employment search, supported by us and the rest of the committee. And that involves resume preparation, job strategy, trying to select individual employers that we're going to seek interviews with, interview prep, follow-up, and all the other stages of a successful job search. And then we stay in touch with them once they've started and help them acclimate to the U.S. workplace and any issues that may come up. The other part of what we do is we've built a network of approximately 40 or 50 employers who know what we do and love what we do and want to see our clients when we think they're a good fit for their jobs. And they're not doing this for charity. They're doing this because it gives them access to a group of potential employees that they wouldn't see otherwise, and who they know generally have a great work ethic and bring a really interesting set of skills and diverse experiences to their workforce. We've placed around 80 clients so far. It is a bespoke effort. It's not something we do at scale, but obviously try to have as much impact as we can. And those clients have come from approximately 30 countries, so a very broad range of regions. During the pandemic, we completely shifted what we were doing, much like what Shoshana said. Obviously, there were not a lot of jobs being placed, and a lot of our people were really in distress. So we completely shifted back to providing support and services to the clients we had worked with before. Probably about half of our clients either lost their jobs or were at risk of losing their jobs. And so unlike most of us who during the pandemic have friends and families and support networks to help, we were very concerned that many of our clients didn't have that type of support network. And so we really worked to, if nothing else, just provide a weekly phone call, a friendly voice, and general emotional support, as well as Shoshana also mentioned, David became a complete expert on helping people find unemployment benefits, food resources, medical resources, et cetera. So that was really our focus for most of last year. As the year ended, we shifted back to starting to take on new clients and focus on new placements again. We're off to a great start. We did 4 in the last month, which is a good month for us. We're excited that as the pipeline starts to open up again and the economy starts to open again, that we're going to really get busy, particularly since I think a lot of the agencies like Hyatt's are going to be themselves staffing up and need the help. So that's what we do. David, I think, will speak for a little while. We also have Shirley Abraham, a BJ member, who is one of our great mentors, who may jump in, and Shaquille Samuel, who's one of our earliest clients and successful placements, and we'll say a few words. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. I don't really have a whole lot to add. I think Shaquille's story is actually a lot more interesting than mine, but I will say that volunteering for this committee and being a mentor is a really interesting, difficult, but ultimately rewarding experience. And I'd encourage anyone who has a business background and has a fair amount of time and inclination to really engage in a one-on-one personal way to contact us if you're interested in becoming a mentor. We right now, I don't probably can't take more mentors for a while, but I keep a list of people that that are interested, and we work our way down that list. The thing we need from the BJ community more than anything are introductions to companies. As Richard said, since we were founded, we've placed 82 people in jobs, and 75% of those placements were with companies in this network of friendly organizations. And these are relationships that we've built just through friendships and introductions. Someone at BJ knows someone who has a business or is in a good place in a big company and can get us an introduction to HR. And then it becomes my role to reach out to these HR people and advocate. So from the perspective of these companies, we're almost like a recruitment firm. We're providing a flow of really good candidates, and a lot of them think it's a great thing. They're getting basically a free hiring service and very loyal people. Anyway, so Richard covered most of it. Shaquille is one of our early clients, and we were very happy to have placed him in a job that he's been in now for quite a while. He's done quite well. He'll tell you a little bit about that and his background and how he's progressed here in his new life in America. Shaquille? I think you might be muted. Can't hear you.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah. Thank you all, especially Richard and David, providing me this opportunity to talk about my experience. My story starts from 2016 in May when I landed at JFK on 31st of May. So I was introduced one of the missionaries, Methodist missionary who used to work in Pakistan, because my background is from Pakistan. So he came to know that I moved to States in a very unpleasant circumstances because there was some persecution. Things are going with my ministry work because I was doing a ministry for the children in Pakistan. So he referred to me to St. Paul St. Andrew's Church, which is very close to BJ. So I moved to that church after arriving to US. So, I mean, I have no hope by that time, rather than just going for the service over there. And they asked me to, why don't you volunteer at VISCA? That's a website campaigns against hunger. So I started being a volunteer over there, and then I was quite lucky enough that I was introduced to Richard through some church contact. Then I feel like so that there is a light of hope. So he started moving with my interview things, with my interview preparation, and the more of it. So he remained in contact with me, just to giving me hope. And it took about a year or so that while I moved from Pakistan here in New York with church and with my other activities like a volunteer, the church providing me a small stipend for my living. Then I started working for one of a tax firm. Then I was remaining in contact with Richard. He referred me such a nice place, that's Orchard Realty Corp. They are doing the real estate management business. So I thought that's the right place for me to work. So from last more than 3 years, I'm there. The story not finished over here. So Richard and David, they remained in contact with me because I was struggling with my legal things, how to bring my family, how I need to go through my asylum case, and how to turn my hearing as early as possible. So I was, because my case was registered through the church SPSA church with their attorney, but somehow the things were not going the way I'm looking from my attorney. But then we ended somehow, and Richard so kindly introduced me one of his teammate, Aliza. She helped me in preparation of my application because my family is having a problem in Pakistan. So she helped me in preparing my application to expedite my interview. So luckily, I was received an appointment letter for my interview, and in a first hearing with the asylum officer, I've been given granted. They approved my asylum, and my status is now asylee from September 2019. Here I like to mention one thing which is really, really impressive in many ways. So I always talk on this thing. So Richard and David, they not only connected me with ORCID and with the employer, but the caring attitude I've seen that is above of everything. And especially I've experienced this thing during this pandemic time. Richard made it possible that he called me every week just to find out how I'm doing, how I'm going with my things, working from home, how my health is, how my family is doing. So that's given me much hope that somebody is there to care for me. So these are the things which means a lot to me, and especially at least my family back. They are at least they are comfortable with my living, with my contacts, and my job situation. So that's only possible through these wonderful people, and I was privileged to be a part of their Thanksgiving dinner 2 times in 2018 and 2019. That's again and such a wonderful thing for me. So here is I'm wearing ORCID New York's shirt. So just to introduce, I'm feeling very comfortable there. They are just like a family, and I think he found a right place for me, and I'm so thankful for all these things, because being a stranger to a strange place, I'm coming from a different background, totally different experience from third world country to the different kind of environment, most modern things, everything is new for me. So, I mean, it was just like I was walking in dark tunnel. So then the light I've seen in the shape of Richard, and he made it. I'm really thankful for all these things. And so far it's more than 3 years, I'm doing fine there. I think so. Also, people are also happy that they are keeping me. So I'm open. If any question, I welcome your question, and I'm willing to respond.
But by the way, ORCID is, for most of you, I'm sure know it is a family that is a key part of B'nai Jeshurun, and it really works when we can combine SPSA, a good friend, ORCID, a key part of the congregation, and all of it coming together is a wonderful thing.
And I'll just chime in that's the company that my great-grandfather started when he came here. My grandfather ran for many years. My grandfather Maxette and Jen, and my uncle Neil is now running ORCID. So all the dots connected.
So they both are my bosses. Max left a wonderful legacy, and Doreen and Neil, they're just like like a parent to me. So I'm honestly saying, maybe I was working maybe I was working with a church, I wasn't feeling as much comfortable as I'm there. Sometimes maybe they ignore my mistakes and they overlook those things just to keep me up, that I feel like I'm a part of that organization.
Great.
Thank you so much, Shaquille and David, and Richard. And again, if we're just about to move into answer some of your questions, I have them. I will ask them of the appropriate folks. But I wanted to share just one thing. I'm going to drop in the chat the links to the form to fill out for folks who are interested in, even if you have any interest in learning more about volunteering or think you might have some skill to share that would be useful either to the Refugee Employment Partnership or to the Family Support Team. That would be really wonderful. The other thing that I will mention is that, as many of you know, we have been working to establish a volunteer cohort of folks who are helping people in our community, and I'd say in the Upper West Side community, register to get vaccines, because as we know, that system in not only in New York City, but elsewhere is very difficult. And we are looking to expand that to establish new partnerships with other community organizations, including Shoshana's, including the Family Support Team, to really focus on. We know that this pandemic has been incredibly inequitable in that most of the communities that have been greatly disparaged are lower income and Black and Brown communities, and know that it is also our obligation to see how we can provide support to others. So if you're interested, if you have been through the process and you think you have some capacity or be interested in learning more about that, feel free to check that off on the form as well, and we will be in touch with you as we develop that further. So I actually am gonna hang on just a second. Oop. So we have a question. These two are going to be for Russ. We have two questions about some of Hyas's work. There was a question about how will BJ and Hyas be involved with passing the immigration bill introduced by the Biden administration. I will let Russ take most of that because I think his answers are probably aligned with how we're thinking about that. And then there was a question on is Hyas taking a stand on the continuing deportations and ICE flights and what that might look like, or if there are other partners, Russ, that you know of who might be addressing that.
Sure, great. Thanks, Larissa. And I said this in the chat, but I do want to say it again before I dig into the questions. It is really like, it is a bracha, a blessing. It is a machaye. It gives me life to just be a part of this conversation with so many incredible folks. Shaquille, to hear your story, to hear the work that is happening on the ground through the community of BJ and through partner communities in the neighborhood. And of course, like Sandy laying the groundwork for such incredible advocacy out of New York City. It's really just a pleasure and a blessing to be here. So to the questions, in terms of the Biden administration's legislation. So to this point, there isn't actually, I know he's proposed legislative text and there's some organizing happening around it, but there hasn't actually been a bill introduced formally into Congress, to my knowledge. I know that there are elements, including things around the refugee program, things around asylum seeker rights, and also things like the No Ban Act that are in the proposed text. So I don't know exactly what our strategy is going to be yet because we don't know what the final text of the bill looks like. We are extremely supportive. We're supportive of the DREAM Act. We're supportive of generally of a path to citizenship for and those sorts of things, generally speaking. But those are our priority issues are really focused on refugee and asylum seekers, and so that is primarily our focus. How much that's going to be in the bill, I think, will impact what role, if any, we are playing in working on that piece of policy. And I'm happy to. I will keep, as I learn more and as I hear more about which groups are taking action on it. Once it's moving a bit more forward, I will be happy to keep Larissa, Rabbi Passow, and anybody else from the BJ team as up to date as I can. And in terms of the deportations, I know that the Biden administration is working to sort of to fight and stop that from whether they're I know they were dealing with a challenge in court. I know they were able to turn around. They were actually able to stop at least one plane heading to Haiti thanks to some work from the administration, and and actually some really active work from Mondaire Jones, who's a new representative who represents Westchester and Rockland County. So we're keeping an eye on that, obviously, and that issue is not it's not central to highest, but I could say I know personally it's really important to me, and I know that it's a thing that we're keeping an eye on as well. As we have actions that we think leaders in our communities, like you folks on this call, can take, we're sharing those out. We have regular communications from my colleagues in our communications department about the work that we're looking to undertake when it comes to Congress and policy issues and taking action. So in addition to signing up the volunteer form, I know the volunteer form has finding out more information from us. So you could always go to highest.org/take-action if you want to sign up for any particular email lists to stay informed on what we're doing.
Thanks so much, Russ. While we still have you, there is another question about is Highest involved with children separated at the border who have been center in Harlem? Do you know of any? I know that there are other community organizations who have been working on that, but not sure if you specifically have any information on that.
I'm sorry,
there
were a couple of words that clipped that seemed like they might be important.
Sure. So the question is Highest involved with children separated at the border who have been sent to a center in Harlem? There were some folks who were children who were specifically relocated.
To my knowledge, we're not working on specifics, like with specific organizations on the ground in Harlem. I know that that's an issue we've prioritized in terms of we want to see family separations end. And to be clear, I'm sure everybody on the call knows this, but in case you don't, unfortunately, family separations, while they were at their cruelest, I would say, in the last 4 years, they're not new, right? This is a policy that we want to make sure is ended going forward, not just reuniting folks, but also making sure it's a policy that ends, that has a real end time.
Great. Thanks. So this, feel free, Richard or David or Cheitan, any of the other folks who spoke. I think this is probably, you might have more of an idea or understanding of this. So someone commented, they noticed that Cheitan and Leah's consistent use of the word families. What about refugees who are individuals? Do any of you know? I mean, I imagine my feeling is that a lot of folks who are being resettled in the US are families. Do any of you know if there are folks who are individuals and if there's any outreach that's happening specifically for them and support?
So I can start, just to start off, say that the family support team tends to serve mostly families because we work with IRC, Catholic Charities, and Highest, and have some of the sort of neediest cases referred to us for the families that require ongoing support. And because families with kids tend to have more needs in terms of getting resettled and getting adjusted, those are the clients that tend to be referred to us. So we work primarily with families. Those are the kinds of services that we offer. But I know that that's not a limitation, or I believe that's not a limitation for the Refugee Employment Program, but I'll let them confirm.
David.
Sure. I think probably close to maybe more than half of our people are not families. They've come here on their own. Many of those have families back home, and Shaquille is an example. So the cruel policies of the Trump administration go beyond just the separation at the border. It was their attack on what they called chain migration, which is really the most humane and thoughtful way of handling immigration, is to allow families to come in as a group. So poor Shaquille has been trying all throughout the Trump administration to get his family here. Many of our people are in that same boat. But also we have a lot of people who are gay and from countries where they were persecuted because of their sexual orientation. And they often don't have families, and they're on their own. And they're very grateful for our help, and they make great employees for the companies that we're placing them in.
Yeah, It's interesting. I think if the Trump administration actually knew how many gay people were successfully navigating the system, probably half of our clients over the last 18 months to 2 years have been gay, and I'm amazed that the Trump administration didn't figure out some way to stop that. But it's obviously been a great source of wonderful clients for us.
Great, thank you all. And Shoshana, you might know more about this. There was based on your work with some of the other partners and also Richard and David, there was a question about whether any new families have arrived since January 1st. When do you expect new families to arrive in the New York area, and who decides when they relocate?
Yeah, so we also, I want to point out that we also work with asylum seeking families, and they are not on a sort of fiscal year cycle. They come in at various times, and we also take on clients who have been here for a year or two but haven't managed to connect with other forms of support. So that's the first thing I'd say. Families, I'm not sure if any of our families that we're currently working with have come in this year. So I would leave it to the other folks to answer that question. But we are in touch with caseworkers who are expecting clients. So I think things are slowly starting to pick up, hopefully, but I'll let everyone else chime in on that.
Yeah, from my perspective, it hasn't really opened up so much yet. I'm sure it will. We have a double problem in that there were the Trump policies, and then there was COVID, which made it a lot more difficult for people to get into the New York airports and seek asylum. So a lot of our people, pre-COVID, had come in. They'd spend their last penny to buy an airplane ticket to get out of a dangerous situation. They arrive at JFK, they request asylum. With COVID, that's impossible. So that's really cut down on the asylees that we've been able to get. But I think we'll start to see a flow from HIAS pretty soon, and it's they do a wonderful job with placement, and they refer clients to us for that sort of added help for job searching.
Great. Does anybody else have anything they wanted to add to that question? Wonderful. So those were all of the questions that were sent directly to me or were put in the chat. We do have a little bit more time. So if anybody had any other questions that they want, feel free to, of any of the folks who spoke tonight, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. But if not, we'll close out. Great. Well, thank you again to Sandy and Richard and Shoshana and Leah and David and Shaquille and Russ. Really thank you for this. We haven't done this in a while. I think it was a great opportunity to gather back together and really hear about, especially given the last year, what you all have been doing, because I think that a lot of it has run in some ways under the radar. I know many of the folks on here are part of our action alert list, which if you also like to be put on that, let me know. But we often, for last minute requests, especially from the family support team, are ways to support, especially the mothers of those families in a lot of their endeavors. A lot of them have been making masks or other crafts and have wonderful things to share. We've been putting those asks and requests for supplies and other goods in the action alert list. So that's one way that we've been able to keep in touch with folks. But again, a lot of this is happening behind the scenes. So we really wanted to bring that out in front of folks and really share all of the hard work that all of you have been doing in your incredible group of volunteers. So really, thank you for making this easy for us to engage folks and also, to live out our values around this very deeply and meaningfully. So with that, I'm going to say goodnight. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Happy to pass you on to the right folks. And please fill out that form if you have any interest in volunteering. But thank you all for joining us and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Larissa.
Thanks so much, Larissa. Thanks for having me. Great to meet everybody.
Thank you, Russ.